Throughout the month of September, we've been biased towards general upside price action somewhere in this red circle right here between these two major fibs. And during the end of last week, we did indeed see price action rally right into the 618 fib right there around 117,500-ish region. And on Friday, we highlighted the importance that, hey, if you see a rejection right here, very likely that's going to have major implications coming into the end of this month, September. But of course, as we get closer and closer to the end of September, the big focus is on the actual closure of September. But because of this rejection right here, I do think that we can start to take the next steps within this overall thread of analysis. And we'll start it off by looking at some daily price action statistics, of which Tuesday, we look at the average percent gains and the average percent losses as general boundaries for the daily range. We can see once again from yesterday's video, which we were live during this time, there was a nice little bounce off of that first pass on the bottom side of that daily range. Now, in this case, that would give us an average range low of about just below 111. So if you do see a wick down around there today, Bitcoin kind of already got down around there, to be fair, expect a bounce. So I'm not necessarily sure if I'd really take the second test on this region right here. I think that this price action is already kind of playing this out. But of course, on the other side, if Bitcoin were to get to 115 today, I think it's unlikely. But if it were, again, on the first pass, I would be looking for a pullback. Again, we've seen this happen so many damn times. If you're a short-term time frame scalper, I think that this is just a beautiful sort of thing to be looking at, because these just play out so fucking often. I mean, basically, we've witnessed this ever since we got access to Caretaker's indicator suite and added the historical price action statistics indicator. Again, that's available for you in the link description below. You can try it out for free, as with anything. Try it out for 7 days, decide if it's for you, decide if it's not for you. But again, if you're a short-term time frame scalper, these have been really, 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 really high probability moves. I mean, it feels like for forever, or at least as long as we've had this. Now, moving on into the general thread of analysis, carrying on with the directional bias, let's say, I want to once again point out that everyone's favorite indicator, the most the most egregiously and controversial indicator that we probably ever talk about ever, which is the moon indicator right here, once again fired off on Sunday. We got what is traditionally the more bearish moon, which has been producing, decent downside price action, especially over the past couple of months, with the last major pullback right here from the 23rd of August, the one over here, of course, from 24th of July, and even the one over here producing some pretty good downside price action from 27th of May. So going back a few months has played out quite well. Even referencing the past year, I mean, it's been actually pretty decent. Again, not 100% probability, but in this case, I would say that this one is already playing out, to a decent degree. And ultimately, that does give us a general sort of down and sideways bias into this next 2-week period, which began on Sunday. So that would bring us into, I think, the early portion of October. Yeah, that'd be like October 5th to October 6th. That's when we get the bullish moon, if you will. But until then, I'd still be outlining sort of a period of I guess, caution and consolidation in alignment with the earlier point that we made that, hey, Bitcoin getting rejection right here at the 618 fib, does indicate that, hey, this is not going to be the parabolic move, or at least unlikely to be the parabolic move that I think a lot of people are looking for. If that was going to hold, we really would have expected Bitcoin to, hold that number or even rally above that number, maybe closer to 120 by the end of this month of September. Still possible, I guess, but with that rejection, I think that is a lot less likely, and I would be biased towards downside price action, especially as long as the moons tell us that, downside a little bit more likely, at least during this period, which brings us into, again, more than the end of September. So putting 2 and 2 together, yeah, I doubt that that's going to happen in that fashion. On top of that, another big point that we were focusing on last week, especially Friday, was Bitcoin's potential ability on CME to close above the HPDR median right here, which was 116,500. On Friday, after living above that level for most of last week, Bitcoin did fail it, thus rejecting it. And again, that does give a downwards bias as Bitcoin lives between not yesterday's, but last week's high and more or less at the bottom side of the 38.2 level right here, which is 107,500. So that is more or less the range as far as I look at it at, coming into, I suppose, the end of September. Am I biased towards the downwards test here to the bottom side of the range? Most likely, yes. Again, that would just be a retest of the September lows. It's not anything like super dastardly, but again, for the people who need this asset to go parabolic and fucking green dildo to the moon and beyond, and not even to the moon, but to fucking Mars, good luck with that. Don't think that that's happening right now. I think that we're going to get, or at least it's more likely right now that we're going to get at least the scenario that I've been really hoping upon, which is Bitcoin stalls here for a while, maybe spends a couple of months going sideways. That's good. That's fine. Sets in a nice base, sets in a nice consolidation, and continues on with the upwards and onwards stair-stepping price action that we've seen throughout the past 3 years since this bull market began, which is very much uncharacteristic of prior bull markets. But again, that to me speaks towards the overwhelming evidence that Bitcoin is maturing here and acting more like a traditional market ETF, which I think is a good thing. Again, that likely prolongs cycles, that likely, I mean, it probably even gets rid of cycles, to be honest, but generally, I think that Bitcoin is kind of poising for, maybe a late 2025 run or early 2026 run, something like that. And it's going to be another like stair step. It's not going to be a massive explosive move. It's hopefully going to be calm and quiet and constructive. That's what we want to prolong market cycles instead of just parabolic up and parabolic down. I know that some people disagree with me on that. That's fine. That's okay. We can have our differences of opinion, but I would prefer long-term stability for this asset. Anyways, moving on from there, I do want to get into a few other things, things that we actually haven't really spoken much about in recent times. Last we spoke about this was maybe the very early portion of September / late August, but I do want to bring up the Tether dominance chart right here because it has been living within our sort of bottoming area for a while now. Or let me actually go to the chart where is it? Where is she? You bastard. Where the fuck have you gone? My charts are escaping me now. How do they do this? How do they do this? There it is. Okay. I am actually redacted today. That is definitely true because I probably missed 5 minutes worth of sleep, which destroys my whole day. Fucking amazing, man. Fucking amazing. Anyways, you can always make up with it with a little bit of extra caffeine, I suppose. Anyways, yes, here is indeed the chart. We've had this area marked off for several months now. We've been looking at this as a likely bottoming zone for Tether dominance, and Tether dominance plays obviously opposite of Bitcoin. So when the Tether dominance is going up, we expect crypto prices, including Bitcoin, going down. And this same area has been effectively the bottoming zone throughout this whole bull market cycle, especially going back to one of the last major consolidations when Bitcoin was playing out about a 7-month-long sideways move in 2024, and then more recently in early 2025 over here. Now, as as Tether dominance does base off this yet again, it does make me a lot more confident that we will see a multi-month-long consolidation emerge from here. And to be fair, Bitcoin's already been consolidating here for about 2 to 3 months. So if we do add another, let's say 2 to 3 months on top of that, taking us close to the end of this year, maybe even all the way to the end of this year, again, that's going to be very similar to what we saw in 2024, especially where most of the year was consolidation. It was about 7 months long. But again, that's setting a major base for Bitcoin to once again launch much higher and carry on with that rally even again a couple more times throughout all of 2025, it feels like. So, looking at this right here, yeah, as long as this is operating on a higher low, I will have a bullish bias on this. Yes, there's going to be ebbs and flows on this. Again, short-term timeframes, you're going to see bounces, you're going to see all sorts of things as usual. Maybe we talk about that during the very end of this stream. But ultimately, this does look like a reversal right here. If you're looking at this as a herp and derp, I mean, you very well could be that left herp, derp, and then right herp over here. There would be an implied move somewhere around about 5%, I imagine. Again, that's going to crush a lot of cryptos if something like that does happen. But fair enough. You got to wash out a lot of the shit in order for the non-shit to shine. If that even, I don't know, does that even make sense? Anyways, I'm just making up sayings at this point. You know what the fuck I mean. You understand the point that I'm trying to make. That's what matters. That's the point of communication. Anyways, all right. Yes, we've got that. Let's also go over general areas of interest for Bitcoin here as it does continue to play out this correction. It really comes back to the same shit that we were looking at before. Again, this 4-day time frame setups fired off over here. This was in early September. We're looking at the interplay between the red moving average and the yellow moving average. When the red moving average crosses the downside of the yellow moving average, we get a minimum correction to the green moving average. I mean, basically every time throughout the past 8 years. Yes, there have been some times where that does not play out, but that was more than 8 years ago. In my opinion, we start to go a little bit too far back, to be honest. Now, that's just my opinion. If you subscribe to those prior beliefs, that those, still really, really matter, fair enough. That is a fair point. It is valid. But ultimately, they all do find their way towards that green moving average at minimum every time, no matter what. Sometimes, just for those prior iterations, they just took a long time and price was much higher, before it got there. But in this case, I suspect, especially with the advent of last week's rejection right around that 618 fib at 117.5. Again, the same area that we had marked off for a very long time throughout September. I am biased towards Bitcoin, working its way sideways and down somewhere around here, which it would be as of right now about 105. Now keep in mind with each and every passing closure, this will rise up a little bit. So that minimum target does get a little bit higher, but we have seen in the past that Bitcoin has overshot it sometimes, by double digit percentages, sometimes by, less than 1%, like we saw over here earlier on within the cycle. But ultimately it does, it typically does get there. On top of that, if we were to reference something else here, which I would like to get back into the Rev and Redact bands, which it's starting to become a very catchy name. I have to give credit to Jay and the Discord for that one. I mean, they're not redacted, obviously, but I don't know. I just love that word, man. Anyways, yeah. So looking at it right here, it is now given a downside target or a downside pattern target, I should say, in this blue box. Obviously, Bitcoin's already in there. This would have been maybe more relevant if we were doing these videos over the weekend, but obviously we don't do that anymore. So yeah, it has hit that target. Again, this is a targeted region, so it is in the sort of shallower end of that region. Of course, could come all the way down here, and I think that it very likely does come all the way down around here, which is just below 110 or so, more or less in alignment with the early September low. And Bitcoin should get another short-term time frame bounce there, especially on a daily. Now, in the very, very short term, what should we be expecting? Or perhaps before we go into the very, very short term, let's go over just stochastic momentum and see how the higher term time frames are lining up, because we did just get another 5-day closure last night. So let's see how they're all kind of aligning as of the moment. Daily time frame is going to continue down here after crossing to the downside for the first time last week since basically mid-August when Bitcoin put in the current all-time high. So you actually do have hidden bearish divergence here, as you do have, the all-time high right here alongside a lower high in price action, but a higher high on our momentum oscillator. So that would be divergence by the definition of it. This one heads to the downside as long as Bitcoin's below 117,250. That's more or less last week's high. So I look at that as a good pivot. I know it's not super helpful, but hey, as long as Bitcoin's below 117.5, I don't look at anything, even remotely threatening towards a real move to the upside. That was sort of like the last chance for bears to prove themselves, and they have proven themselves thus far. And I don't suspect that we're going to see above that number in the month of September at least. Anyways, the 2-day time frame is also going to be freshly crossed into the downside. That will happen tonight, by the way, if Bitcoin finishes the day below 115, 150. I think that that's very, very likely. That's even above what the average daily range would be based off of this over here. So very unlikely. That would more or less just eat up yesterday's dump, which possible, I guess, but less probability. Of course, this is also playing out a trendline regression rejection here from the last few major highs from July and again in May most of May. So playing out that does still tell us that that is legitimate. And well, again, cross into the downside would have the daily and the 2-day on the same side. The 3-day time frame is going to continue up here. This one won't close tonight, but tomorrow night, this one will continue up as long as Bitcoin's above 110. But again, looking at this, I mean, it just looks weak to me. With Bitcoin closing back below or potentially closing back below the yellow moving average, which is the 21 EMA at 113,500. I mean, it seems like it's almost destined to play out a move towards that green moving average. You have the same setup here, by the way, with the red and the yellow moving average. You can see that Bitcoin got very, very close to the green moving average over here, but did not officially test it. And again, that is a minimum target. So to officially test it, you must officially test it. In this case, it would need to ever lovingly just grace its fingertips along 108,500. And again, minimum means minimum, meaning that, it could overshoot. But yeah, that's in alignment with those lows from, again, early September/late August. Moving on from there, 5-day time frame, which again just closed last night, is going to continue to the downside here. So the 3-day time frame is kind of the odd man out right now. And keep in mind that this is within the context of extremely low volatility. So that is what does make me a little bit concerned that this correction could drag on, lower and longer. Which again, I mean, is that really a concern, or is it just, or is it actually more of like a long-term signature of healthiness? I mean, perhaps more so that if I think about it. But again, this one is angled to the downside here as long as Bitcoin is below 114. Obviously trading $1,000 below that right now. And I should also acknowledge that this one is going to be, if Bitcoin starts to close below 112, which it's not right now, but if it does, if it starts to hang out below there, we're going to get that same setup here on the 5-day time frame between the red and the yellow moving average. And again, that green moving average is, well, about 102-ish, 103, somewhere around there. So that would be another minimum target if we got that setup firing as well, which we don't right now, admittedly, we don't. But again, these have been all of the major corrective moves that we've seen throughout this cycle. There are a few other signals as well, that we've gone over in other videos. I won't go over them in today's video, but, you probably already know what they are. Anyways, yes, so that's the 5-day time frame. So we got the daily, the 2-day, and the 5-day working in the same direction. 3-day time frame probably updates tomorrow. I imagine that's probably gonna be to the downside as well. 10-day time frame is also angled to the downside below 121. So this is a much higher number. That is not very confidence-inducing in my opinion. The 2-week time frame also coming down below 119. That's gonna be closing at the end of this month. At the end of this week as well. So all of them are more or less in the same direction. The 3-day time frame is the odd man out. That again tells me this is not a time to be looking for mega massive girthy green dildos to the upside. It's a time to be looking for sideways consolidation, likely with the downside bias. How far down does it come? I think Bitcoin probably tests the early September lows. Does it happen while September is still around, or maybe that happens in October? I don't fucking know that. I mean, Jesus Christ, I don't have a fucking crystal ball, but sometime I would imagine within the next month. And what would be the next major area of interest if that fails, which very possible. Basically $100,000, a little bit above $100,000, anywhere around there is completely fair game. But take one step at a time. Again, I don't look at this as an overall bearish thing. I look at this as actually a long-term good thing. As I've been stating for a while now, to go parabolic from here, in my opinion, would be very much bittersweet. I don't like the parabolic shit, to be honest. I really don't, because, well, what goes up must come down, typically in the same fashion. I mean, that's exactly what we've seen in Bitcoin's history, and that's what you see in most assets that do shit like that. Anyways, let's also go over the lower term timeframes. I've been getting a lot of press for this as well, which is fair game. Let me actually look at this chart right here. Let's see what this one's looking like from the RSI perspective. Let's reference some caretaker RSI business over here. No signals on the 4-hour time frame, but ultimately, is this a consolidation on the lows? Is this likely to lead towards lower price action? Very likely, yes. If there is a bounce, I think that it likely gets arrested somewhere here at the 382, which is 113,700-ish region. I don't really think that we're going to see above there for a while. Maybe I'm being a little bit too aggressive with that. If you want to be a little bit more, I guess, conservative, 115,750 would be the area that I'd be like, I don't think we're seeing above there anytime soon. And if we do see above there, that'd be my first major warning signal that something different is happening. But still not fully confirmed until we're back above last week's high. Last week's high is an incredibly important pivot going onwards and forwards here for the higher term timeframes. But as it stands right now, if Bitcoin does get a rally, maybe somewhere around here, which is not a whole hell of a lot higher than where it's at right now, maybe $1,000. But this does favor the downside ultimately. And if we do go even into short-term time frame, let's say maybe like a 12-hour, maybe you get a bounce here towards 114, but I'm not super excited about that. Again, it doesn't really change all that much. So ultimately, I think that we're still in kind of like a wait and see, boring time. Or it's not necessarily wait and see, it's just boring times, get ready for sideways, and likely some downside. Again, that doesn't make me super bearish or anything like that. I really wouldn't even entertain the possibility of bearishness as long as like real bearishness, like highs for Bitcoin being in, especially as long as you're above like $80,000. It's a massive range, obviously, but we're dealing with massive numbers here at the same time, and as a good counterpoint to what I'm saying, my one rule for the monthly is that as long as you're above all major moving averages, especially the red 5 EMA, don't want to get too bearish or anything like that. It's not a bear market, when you're doing something like that or anything like that. And that's as of the moment at basically the month's low at 108 or so, a little bit below there. So keep that in mind. Again, a lot of this analysis is really going to hinge upon Bitcoin's ability to close green or red by the end of September. I would now be leaning towards it, at least not closing above 117 by the end of September. But that doesn't necessarily imply that we're going to see below or red closure for this month. So again, a lot still remains to be determined. I think that that's likely going to govern how long we see this correction go on for. But for right now, again, I think that does offer up more long-term viability for Bitcoin. Anyways, I've been rambling for far too long. I do apologize about that. As usual, we'll be back on tomorrow with another live stream analysis. Really been enjoying these recently, by the way, so I really want to say massive thank you to the people who have been joining in. It's been really, really good conversations. I really love the back and forth, and also, it's just like fun engagement. Anyways, as usual, we'll be back on at 9 a.m. Eastern time, and other than that, I want to wish you the best. Take care, much love, and see you hopefully tomorrow.